Hey everyone, massive welcome to our brand new series here on InfoSec Live, How to Hire Cyber Talent, where we get to engage with and learn from the cybersecurity industry's leadership in a live setting with open and honest conversations. For those of you that are new to the channel, my name's Simon Linstead. I'm the founder of the InfoSec Live community, and today we are live from Black Hat, London. Well, an apartment nearby anyway. And today I'm going to be joined by Clint Bodungen, a world-renowned industrial cybersecurity expert, public speaker, published author, and cybersecurity gamification pioneer. He's the lead author of Hacking Exposed Industrial Control Systems and co-creator and lead designer of the ThreatGEN Red versus Blue cybersecurity gamification platform. And drawing on his 25 years of experience, we're going to be digging into why the current hiring practices in the industry are broken and what we can do to fix them. But before we bring him on, sharing stories and best practices over the last few months has led to nearly 6,000 hours of our content being viewed on YouTube by over 2,300 subscribers, and has qualified us to become members of the YouTube Partner Program. And this achievement also allows us to offer you, our members, new and exciting ways to support the YouTube and the InfoSec Live community, giving you the ability to purchase super stickers in the YouTube chat if you'd like your question bumped up to the top, and 3 tiers of membership allowing you to show your support in any way that you can. But whether you join or not, being here and engaging with our content is what really matters. And I want to say a big thank you to our latest members, Aaron Lax, Alana Boyajian, Josh Copeland, Peter Element, and Kevin Apollinario. Your support is helping us grow the InfoSec Live Scholarship Scheme and so much more. And if you're watching this live, please do like and subscribe. We want to make these events as interactive as possible. So also make sure you drop any questions in the chat. And I think that's enough of me rambling on. Let's get to what you're all here for, and let's bring Clint on. If I can find the button, bear with me. Well, you mentioned 25 years, so I just thought I'd do a retro little stinger there. Make you feel
I kind of feel like that was my old TRS 80 or the Trash 80 as we called them.
Yeah, was that Texas? Was that Texas Instruments? Or
Yeah. I think
show my age as well. But look, massive thank you for giving up some time to come on today. Excuse the very
forced me to do it.
I did, yeah. We'll talk about that live, though. You promised. I want to apologise for the beige background. I've rented an apartment or a hotel allegedly to stay down whilst at Black Hat, and I was just saying to Clint before we came on live, I've turned up to this apartment, walked up to the reception desk, got told this isn't a hotel, it's private apartments, left, called the number, and was told to tell him it's my mate John's apartment and everything's fine. So I'm in someone else's house, live with Clint from the USA at Black Hat in London. So again, this isn't my golden beige background. Just wanted to cover that off.
Reefer in the cupboards, and
I've looked. Yeah, there's lots of fruit tea, but there we go. Just a quick hello to everyone in the chat. There's loads of you in today. Splodge, Greg, Kerry, Liam, Alana, Ellie, my wife Laura, love you, miss you very much. Nishant, Tosin, thank you so much, all of you. Sorry if I've missed anyone as well. But Clint, we're here to talk about the effing mess that is the recruitment processes and the hiring practices in the cybersecurity industry. Now, I'm a newbie reasonably to the industry, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out that it's a mess. But what I want to do today is draw on your 25 years experience and talk about why it's a mess and what we can do to improve it.
I wonder if it's the same mess for hiring rocket scientists.
Probably more difficult. Yeah.
Less
links in networking.
I think that it's the problems that we face are no surprise to most people. The cliche, I have an entry-level position, I need 7 years of experience kind of thing.
And CISSP.
Yeah, exactly. Or the entry-level position for CISSP, which most people know that a CISSP already requires, what is it now, 5 years of experience?
5 years.
5 years. It used to be 3 whenever I originally got mine, and then let it expire because, quite frankly, it's one of those things that I found that I didn't need for my particular path. But
I think it's nice if an employer is paying for it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's with a lot of certifications. So I think one of the things that we can get into here in this conversation today is also certifications. Are they worth it or not? How do they help your job, your not only if you're looking for a job, but how you should value certifications as an employer and what to look for. So, I think ultimately there's a couple fundamental problems with cybersecurity hiring, and you've probably heard the cliches, the what do you want to call them, rumors or anecdotes or facts, regardless, the hiring gap, right? Or I mean the skills gap. There's a
Skills gap,
skills
yeah.
gap, and I don't believe that there is a skills gap, or if there is a skills gap, it's predicated by a hiring problem. Okay, and
Would
that's what
you
we're
would you
talking about
say
here.
if there is a skills gap, it was at the leadership end of the market more than it is the other end?
That's probably a good point. And it probably is at the leadership end, because there's certainly not a shortage of people wanting to get into cybersecurity,
No.
and I think that, and let's get into the root of this problem, right? And yes, it's illustrated a lot by the I need a unicorn, but it's entry level, or even it's the opposite problem, right? You have people that say, I'm looking for an entry level position with 5 years experience in a CISSP, but there's also people that say, I want somebody who is a pen tester, who also knows GRC, and who also knows how to program 5 different models of PLCs and 3 different industrial verticals. And by the way, we're going to pay you $40,000 a year, or 40 quid. So what and that's the opposite problem. Is people want the world, but they're not going to they're going to pay them bones, right? So um, that's the obvious problem, but so if you're doing that, the simple answer is stop. Okay, good program. See ya. No, but I think I think that at the end of the day, there's some alternative views that I think employers need to look at, such as where you're finding your talent, how you're looking for talent. Okay. And I think that before we get into this, there's also probably some differences in culture, hiring culture,
Yeah,
between Europe, UK, the United States.
definitely,
And
yeah.
and before I get into all of this, I want to first say that none of this is meant to devalue or disrespect any certifications or degrees. Okay, I take that back. I'm going to disrespect some certifications, but outside of that, um, I'm not trying to demean any degree programs, diplomas, or most certifications. But I think that right,
Yeah. However, go
yeah,
on.
yeah. So I think that there is still, maybe nowadays, let's say there's an outdated or misrepresented focus on certain certifications and degree.
100%.
Um, so, for example, and I don't know how it is in the UK, in Europe, but in
Same.
the US, um, we have found extraordinary talent at all levels, even leadership positions, that don't have even college degrees, much less a specific like electrical engineering or computer science degree, right? And
Yeah.
this is a big area in that. And then, so there's a question up there: are there too many certifications? The answer is yes, and I'm going to get into that. But
Thank
so
you.
the you know one of the things that I've done, kind of in my volunteer time, is help establish and teach programs for unrepresented areas, underfunded areas. And one of the things that I found is that there are extremely talented kids, and this is the lower end of the market. I say kids; they're 18 to 20, 4-year-old adults. But the entry level market is full of extreme talent, and these are individuals that would get overlooked by traditional hiring programs because they can't afford to go get a degree, but they've spent their entire childhood playing video games, hacking programs,
Yeah.
writing cheat codes, and
They-
understand
they-
data.
They've been hacking programs to get them for
Yeah,
free. They can't afford them.
yeah, yeah. But and what people need to understand is that cybersecurity is about attitude, and it's about it's cybersecurity is not just a skill set and a job title. Cybersecurity is a mentality. And to be a cybersecurity professional, you have to have a certain mentality. And I would and what I tell people when I tell employers is hire for aptitude and attitude over experience and credentials.
And do you know what the most frustrating thing is? After speaking to, I think, 35 sort of enterprise level CISOs over the last 6 months, they all say exactly the same. But it's breaking down somewhere, because if
Yeah.
they're saying that, you're saying that. And this is the frustration I think you see from people who are trying to break into the industry, is that you've got people not like me, but like you and these other leaders who actually know what they're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the rest of the industry isn't following that.
Well, I
Where
think the breakdown is the breakdown. Number one is you need to, if you're a hiring manager, you and I know it's easier said than done, but if you're a hiring manager, you need to take an active part in writing the job rec and doing the interview process. And because here's what's happening, and I agree with the comment that was
Yes.
made in the comments, is that the technical recruiters don't seem to fully understand the requirements of the position. That's not just like third party headhunters, that's also HR. So I guarantee you the breakdown. So the fundamental problem is, first of all, where I just mentioned that it's the requirements are wrong and how you're looking is wrong. But also, even if the CISOs have the right sentiment, they have the right ideas, there's a breakdown with HR and with recruiting. And I understand a lot of that has to do with, well, there's certain policies they have to follow. Or if you're a larger company and there's a lot of resumes, you have to have a way to narrow the
Filter them out.
pool and things like that.
Yeah.
But that's okay, fine. Adjust your filters. Stop requiring 4-year degrees, master's degrees. Stop requiring certain certifications, because I'm going to tell you right now, requiring, except for functional certifications, right? So like if you're a pen tester, having something like an OSCP where it's
Yeah.
a practical
Just
test,
saying that because
that's
I failed
great.
it, aren't you? You're just saying that because I failed it, yeah?
Yeah, I am. But
Um,
but besides that, look, everybody knows you were not meant to be a pen tester. Let's
I know
just
me.
face it,
It's just me who needs to realize that.
Yeah, yeah. Stop playing the red team on red versus blue, but
It's too hard, Clint. It's too hard.
yeah. So but at the end of the day, certifications are meant to, outside of the practical certifications. I mean, it just shows that you can retain information. Certifications just show that you can retain information. You read the book, you read or the exam cram. You can retain the information and you can relate it to a multiple choice
Yeah.
test. It doesn't prove that you have practical knowledge or that you can apply that knowledge in a job situation. And so that's what irritates me about requiring certifications that aren't practical in nature.
I'd like to blame society on that as much as the cybersecurity industry. I mean, my wife's watching, and as a parent of 6 children, I've seen, my oldest is 23. He's working in London as well, and we've got 4-year-old twins. So I've kind of seen every aspect of it. We get taught to pass exams. We don't get taught to apply knowledge. We don't get
Yeah,
taught.
absolutely.
We don't get taught to critically think.
Yep.
And that's the whole problem. And we've now got a societal and an industry-wide, in every industry, issue where certification providers have owned it, right?
Yeah. Well, and number one, I kind of like to say that the certification industry is like the pharmaceutical industry, right? I mean, it's you're there's an industry that is governed by those who profit,
Yeah,
and when it comes down to it, is when it would the reason why our educational system teaches to take exams, teaches to the exams, is what I found is twofold. Number one is, you know, well, it's threefold actually. Number one is bureaucracy, right? It's public education, dictating what has to happen, but it has to do with money and it has to do with funds. But it also, when you have so many people, let's let the teachers off the hook on this one,
Yeah.
because every teacher that I talk, okay,
It's
there are
lowest,
some
it's
lazy
lowest
teachers.
common denominator, isn't it, as
Yeah,
well?
yeah, but yeah, exactly. It's lowest common. Thanks George Bush in America. For no child left behind. But teaching to lowest common denominator, you have to also. And so here's an interesting concept. And I know we're digressing a little bit from the hiring process. We're talking about the educational system, but here's something I want to point out is that so my kids are homeschooled, and we started that during the pandemic, and it we kind of found out that it works best for us, so we stuck with it. And
Yeah.
because I mean they were falling behind, without going to a formal education, formal school. So we started homeschooling, and what we found out is that the they actually learn more in less hours, homeschooling, than they do in an actual public school, because
Yeah.
there's so many kids, they don't get the individual attention. And like I said, you're being taught to just to an exam. It's just easier to do it. So it's a lot of factors, right? But let's get back on point. I do think that has carried over to the certification industry,
Yeah.
and it's a mentality. I'm just going to teach to the exam. But what we have to get back to, and this is what my suggestion would be to everyone, every hiring manager out there, you know, if you want to use certifications as an entry level litmus test, if you want to use certifications as, okay, this is an indication, I know they've at least read the knowledge and they've passed the test, so they have that knowledge. I would suggest that all employers also either ask questions that get more into practical application of that knowledge. How do you
Dig
apply
deeper.
that knowledge? Yeah,
Yeah.
dig deeper. Or if you don't have those certifications, look at the resumes more thoroughly and look for. I encourage applicants to put any community projects that they've done, anything they've
Yeah.
done in school, anything that they've done for volunteer work as experience. To me, if you've done that, if you've taken it upon yourself and you've done volunteer work, self-led projects, these kind of things, that shows that you have the mentality for a cybersecurity professional more so than any certification.
Completely
And
agree.
so employers, hiring managers, you need to look at like I said, aptitude, attitude over credentials. And I understand that there's policies in place. I understand that there's bureaucracy in place that make it difficult for HR, for that process to take place. But the change has to start somewhere. And you can't, to sit there and say, well, that's just policy and that's just the way it is when it comes to something like this, is not good enough.
No, it's not. I completely agree. Let's jump back in the chat because we've got a couple of questions in there. Splodge or Richard, how are you, mate? Are there too many interviews for entry level positions? Should it be one or two and not 4 to 6?
That's an interesting question, because I've been in organizations to where they've had like what they call this, 360-degree hiring process, to where everybody on the team gets a chance to talk to, and I think that the number of interviews, I think, yes, there are too many now, because if you want to give everybody a chance to talk to the hires, or maybe at least
Yeah.
everybody on the team a chance to talk to the applicants, I think that that you can have a group interview. You can have them talk to more than one person on the same call. But yeah, I think once you start getting to, okay, we're going to have so it's understandable to have a screening call, right?
Of
But
course.
however, the person doing the screening call should not just be checking off a box, going through a script and checking off those credentials. The person doing the screening should actually have knowledge of the position and understand that aptitude, that attitude, kind of persona, right? So they need to the screening process needs to be improved. You need to understand how to find better applicants in the screening process. Then the second interview should be your technical interview, validation, understanding the application of the skills that you say and then the third interview should be the validation from senior leadership, and it should be the offer, right? So I believe it should be, in a perfect world, should be 3 meetings, right? It should be a quick screening, the conversation screening, your actual practical interview, a practical, and then the leadership validation, meet the leaders, and then you get your offer or whatever. So, or make a decision from there. That's the way I think it should be.
That makes absolute sense. Carey's just made a point in here, actually. Thanks, Carey. That this is everything that's wrong with it. That last college you sat through, they were showing us how to pass the exams. And I had a message on LinkedIn today from an Indian company offering me CISSP guaranteed 100% pass, which I thought was nice.
Yeah. But I mean, and again, that's testing, to the certification or whatever. And so,
Yeah.
I think that, there are definitely ways that, that you can demonstrate your practical knowledge, practical
Well, I
application
think
rather
well,
than.
I want to come back to that in a bit because Robert, hey Robert, he's jumped in and mentioned, you know, you could use a gamification platform or ThreatGEN Red versus Blue, in obviously in this instance to do that. And I want to cover that off later because we were talking about this on a call earlier on in the week, and I think it's quite exciting actually the potential there. But going back to Richard or Splodge, another question: what's more important? Adaptable, obtuse, or alternative thinking, or technical knowledge when it comes to you coming out with some tricky ones today, Richard.
I mean, well, you, you can't have one without the other in order to be applied knowledge.
Right.
When it comes to a technical discipline, you have to have technical knowledge, but you also have to have the ability to adapt and think outside the box using that technical knowledge. So they it's not either or. They go hand in hand.
Hand in hand. Yeah.
Yeah. You can't have a technical position without having that technical knowledge. But the adaptable, obtuse, or alternative thinking at that goes to what we're saying in terms of you have to demonstrate that you can apply that knowledge.
Absolutely. And Greg, thanks for the question. In general, your opinion, are the best candidates for open positions the ones who apply or the ones who are headhunted? That depends, doesn't it?
It depends on the interviewer, the applicant, right? I mean, I've seen crap in both ways, right? And I've seen great in both. I've seen uh well, and a lot of that honestly depends on the quote unquote headhunter, right?
Oh
I
yeah.
know I know some really great technical recruiters out there, and I'm gonna name drop one because
Yeah,
it's so
go on.
fan. Ryan Erickson is a recruiter. When I met him, and I knew him, he specialized in ICS um, talent, and there are more out there, right? I mean, Drew Horsley is another one who specializes in finding industrial. But those two, Drew is probably the most pragmatic recruiter I've ever met, and Ryan is probably one of the most talented, personable recruiters I've ever met. They find quality candidates. They know what they're doing, but there are also the headhunter agencies that don't give a flip about
Yeah.
finding that those people that understand pragmatic and practical application of the skills. So I think that falls on the recruiter as to whether you're getting good candidates or not.
Well, before we move on to ways to assess those candidates, a different way than looking at the trifecta of CompTIA exams. Sorry, I shouldn't pick on people, but you get the point.
Yeah.
Do you think that some recruitment, I've got to be careful what I say, really, thinking about my future in the industry. Do you think an open and honest debate will not?
I'm not sure how I should take that.
um,
When
I
this
forgot.
fails,
I've forgotten what I was saying now. No, I've remembered. So in the US and the UK, it's slightly different. So in the UK, recruitment fees range between 10 and 15%. And with a lot of those, you have to pay an amount up front, even irrespective of whether you get anything from it at all, right? In the US, it's double that, isn't it? Fees
yeah,
wise?
I've seen upwards of 30%.
Yeah. So do you think those practices, and fair play to those recruiters in their Ferraris who are charging 30%, do you think that's prohibitive to some companies getting the talent they need? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, certainly for ThreatGEN, right? I mean, if we, thankfully
I had to pay you to work with you. So, you know.
wait a second. Robert said that we had to pay you. Whoa, all right, I'm gonna have a talk with Robert. Anyway, so you know, companies like ThreatGen, where and like I was going to say is, fortunately, we work in an industry to where we rarely have to use recruiters, because we've been around long enough to where we know so many people in the
Yeah.
community and the industry. But for those companies that aren't really that ingrained in the community, and or maybe first starting out, they don't have the resources to pay. So you have to rely on recruiters, and that is prohibitive, right? And then it's kind of like insurance. If you go with cut the rate insurance, you're going to get what you pay for. And I'm not talking about Liberty Mutual. I'm talking that's American joke.
I know.
But it's but no, it's you really can't afford those fees. The larger companies can, mid-sized companies can, but it is absolutely prohibitive for smaller companies and startups for certain.
It is, and I think at the moment, I mean, enterprise and bigger organizations, most of them, well, that's a lie. Some of them, more of them than smaller businesses, have taken on board the need for security. I think, however, at the smaller end of the market, they haven't necessarily, unless you're in, a regulated industry or something that's sort of critical infrastructure wise. And
Yeah.
I think that's a big blocker again for these companies. Where do they start? Because they think they need a pen test, right? That's what they get told by the insurance company.
Well,
But
I think that is right in line with what we were saying earlier about not understanding the requirements, right? Because, you know, again, if I've come across so many organizations where they'll say, well, we need a pen test, and okay, fine. And we start talking about the scope, we do a pen test. And at the end of the pen test, they're like, well, where's my list of comprehensive vulnerabilities and mitigation actions and all that? Well, that's not a pen test. That's a vulnerability assessment. Oh, well, where's my risk calculations and priorities? No, that's a risk assessment, And so, it's cybersecurity in the nomenclature is complex enough without having the recruiters and HR muck it up, right? So ultimately, I mean, yeah, you have to understand the requirements, whether you're hiring a contractor to do a project or whether you want to hire an individual, or you have to understand your needs, right? And in order to understand the requirements. So,
and that, I mean, that's all about fact finding, isn't it? And finding out,
yeah.
doing the job properly, which I think again goes back to the hiring practices where they perhaps don't ask enough questions. And sometimes that prescriptive sheet of information you get for a job spec. I mean, I've been doing a bit of recruitment recently, and you have to kind of ask more questions to get the information that you need, I think, to even start having those conversations with the candidates. And the US is worse than the UK for this. And that's not telling you what the salary is. And I don't
Yeah.
get that, because why would I even apply for your job if I don't know what you're going to pay me?
Yeah, and that's starting to change. I'm starting to see some companies out there. They're
Yeah.
putting at least a range out there, and that's better than. But
I
yeah,
get, I get the range. It depends on experience, doesn't it? If you've got 10 years experience or 2 years, you want more money. So,
well, and I mean, to be honest with you, if you have a position open, and it's already a range, if you're hiring for a certain, and there's a lot of different. This is a great point for hiring managers, is that if I have a job requisition, and I'm looking for somebody with 5 years of experience, and you find somebody with 10 years of experience, and that person with 10 years of experience is demanding more, and you say, okay, well, fine, I'll pay you more because you have 10 years of experience. It needs to be well communicated between yourself and the person you're hiring what that job is, because one of the things that I found is that these you have companies out there that say, even if they don't say they're 1 to 10 year person or 20-year person, you hire somebody who's highly skilled and highly experienced, but you don't really have the need for that. What ends up happening is that really experienced, highly experienced person is going to be doing crap work, or they're not going to be doing the job they're
you're gonna leave.
expecting, and they're going to end up leaving, right? Yeah. So having an accurate spec, or job requisition description, and making sure that you're hiring the right person for the right job, and that goes both ways. It's not just you know making sure you're hiring someone with the skills to do that job, but also making sure that you're not over hiring for the position.
Well, again, it's also, experience or years in industry doesn't equal great candidate, does it? Let's be honest.
Exactly. I
You
mean,
might have 10 years sitting at a screen looking at logs and sending a report off once a day. You
Yeah,
know,
exactly,
no other,
exactly.
no other input than that. Do you want that person who wants to come to yours and do that all day, every day for another 10 years? Or do you want someone with less experience coming in who's hungry and wants to actually make a difference?
Yeah, exactly. And so there's a question again,
Richard,
in your
yeah,
opinion, yeah.
this one.
Oh, we did I miss one? Oh, yeah, yeah. Is it better to go for a large or small company? So this is on the opposite end, right? From a applicant
Yeah,
perspective. And again, I'm going to have to say it really depends on what you're looking for, right? And it really depends on the type of company, right? Because, for example, working, and I know this from experience, working for a large bank is different than working for a large consulting firm. There's two different cultures. And so it really, now, if you want to be more compartmentalized and do the job you were hired to do and kind of stick there, then working for a large oil and gas company or a large bank or something like that, you're going to be doing the job you were hired to do. And that doesn't mean they don't provide the opportunity to move laterally or move up or whatever, but that's usually what's going to happen. If you go work for a large consulting firm, say, so, like a Deloitte or a Capgemini or a Booz Allen, you're not going to be compartmentalized so much because the nature and the culture of those companies, you're going to go in, get hired, but even though you have a job, you still have to apply for jobs once you get in the company, because the culture of those companies is you get in and now you have to find projects to attach yourself to, and then you get to go to different projects. So you're going to be doing a lot of stuff. So for a lot of people earlier in your career, landing a job with the KPMG, Deloitte, is great because you get to experience a lot of different things and figure out what you want to do. But myself, um, you know, at this point, I wouldn't, like, let's say ThreatGEN went rear up. I probably wouldn't go work for a large consulting firm because I'm closer to retirement than I am the middle of my career, so I don't want to experience a lot of things. I already know what I do and what I done. I'm the old guy saying, get the hell off my lawn. So, and I know where my lawn is and I know how to mow it, and don't tell me what to do. So, but in smaller firms, you have, the, you get to do a lot of things. You're not going to be compartmentalized. You're going to wear
you get to wear
responsibility.
lots of hats. You get to
Yeah,
wear lots.
you get to wear lots of hats, but it's a lot more stressful. It's a lot less certain. There's a lot less security. So job security. But anyway, so it depends on a lot of factors. So and I think let's spin that back to the topic of conversation here, which is from the employer's perspective, which is be open and candid about the expectations. Because the first time I went to go work for a large consulting firm, I didn't know the expectation was going to be, once I got a job, I also had to go find a job. I mean,
Yeah.
so
Well, let's go back to, like you said, this is about, so not wanting to detract away from any questions in the chat, but this is meant to be about, from a hiring manager or a recruiter's perspective,
yeah,
what
yeah,
what can be done differently. And we started off the discussion talking about certifications, and I think you and I had the conversation the other day where you talk about, it's all very well having the qualifications, but then how do you know that people can apply that knowledge? And this is where companies at the moment are falling down, and why you see
yeah.
turnover of staff and all these problems. Now, the gamification platform that you've co-created, ThreatGEN, I think that could be an amazing tool for that job.
That's why
Let's,
we created it. Yeah.
yeah, let's talk about how that could work.
So gamification in general, and there's gamification and there's game based. Gamification is simply applying game like elements to any mundane task, procedure, process. So leaderboards and points and competition, right?
Yeah,
Game based, think of the word game based is the simulation side of a game, of gamification, right? So if I just have points in a leaderboard, that's gamification. However, if I create a simulation, then that's game based. Now, not all simulations are gamification. Not all simulations are game based. So a gamified simulation that's game based. That's what we're talking about here. So The reason why that works so well for applied knowledge validation is because you're actually having them do what they would be doing. In other words, they have to do it. They can't just sit there and say A, B, A. You actually have to do it. Now, here's the difference between game based simulation and gamification. Okay, so a capture the flag, okay, the CTF is gamification of technical skills, and in a way, it is having you apply that skill, right? Because you have to apply certain technical skills
Yeah.
in order to solve the problems, solve the challenges, right? And that's what you have cyber ranges for, to so that you can show that you understand these technical skills in a realistic environment. But what you don't get, and where cybersecurity lives, right? When we get out there and we do cybersecurity, right? When we're doing it as professionals, you're not going to solve challenges. You're not solving puzzles. Now, if you're doing forensics, if you're a SOC analyst, yes, at an entry level, you're doing those things, right? But cybersecurity is not a one-sided solve problems, solve challenges. Cybersecurity is an active defense, or if you're a pen tester, an active, and this is not just for defensive red teamers too, right? So if I'm going to be a professional red teamer or pen tester, I'm not just going to go and solve challenges, especially in a full red team engagement. I'm
Yeah.
actually going to be going against a blue team. So in real life, cybersecurity, you have to have an adversary, and that adversary has to be working against you. That's where game-based simulation comes in. So solving passive challenges is great for technical practice, but if you really want to have the ability to have applied skill, applied knowledge, you need to do it like you would be in real life, which means I have to go against an adversary, and that adversary has to be working against me and challenging me, because security is not set it and forget it like an easy bake oven, right? Security is, once I put my defense out there, somebody's going to mess it up or try to get around it, and I have to adjust and pivot. Same thing on the red team side. There's a defender out there blocking me off, and I have to get around it. So at the end of the day, games, and this is where we learned that, I mean, that's what games are. Game is an adversary. You're playing against somebody, and so ultimately, that's why gaming engines, game-based simulations work so well for cybersecurity. It's tailor-made for cybersecurity because cybersecurity is a natural adversary event, and video games are adversarial by nature. And so that's why using games as a simulation is the perfect environment to test practical skills.
And let's take it a step back from the hiring process as well, and look at the overall education process, because we've mentioned my failed attempt at being a pen tester, and I mention it all the time, and it was clearly the wrong career for me. I did hyper focus on studying for that. I learned how to do a reverse shell and a few other bits and pieces, but not enough to actually understand what I was doing and why. And what I've loved about playing the ThreatGEN game in particular is how, and as you rightly pointed out, I only ever play the red team. That's because there's so much going on the blue side, and I haven't got the interest to dig into that. But what it has,
There's a lot going on both sides.
I just like attacking, right? That's kind of what floats my boat. And I haven't just learned the attack methods. I've also learned where they fit in the overall industry, and what all these different job roles mean, and what all these different, analogies that I keep hearing on LinkedIn and everywhere else mean. And it's been an absolute eye opener for me as a kind of non-professional layperson, I suppose, who's tried to get a handle on where the industry is. And I think that, do a couple of name drops: Hack the Box, try Hack Me. Hack the Box for me is what got me interested in the first place. And I loved it, right? But it only taught me that bit, which is, the attacker part, but it doesn't tell you where that fits in to everything else.
Well, and here's what I have to say about, all of the cyber ranges. They're all, really not, well, some cyber ranges are crap, some are good, but the cyber ranges in general are all really good at helping you practice the technical skills, and they all have their place. But without the more comprehensive strategic level bubble to go around it, right? Like you said, Simon, you don't get the comprehensive big
No,
picture. So
don't
here's
get
what we like to say. Cyber ranges don't allow you to see the forest through the trees. And it's all compartmentalized micro skills, and you're not set in the big picture. And what we like to say at ThreatGEN is that, you know, a the ThreatGEN platform, a more strategic level where it puts it all together, it it helps you see the forest through the trees. We are the forest of the trees. That's what it is. And so, but that's what you have to have, because, you know, even having cybersecurity, the technical skills, at the end of the day, when you go do your job, it's not just about solving that challenge. It's putting two and two together and understanding, okay, you know, what does this signature mean? What do these TTPs mean? Or or you know, this what does this indicator of compromise mean? And when I start putting all these things together, using that with threat intelligence, you have to start understanding what that means. You have to start understanding what type of attack it is, and then how to defend against it, and how to communicate this to your mitigation team. So it's about the big picture. It's about how all it works together, and that's why it's so important. Now, I understand a lot of this is going to be learned on the job, right? And so, and
yeah.
if you're hiring someone, so, you know, that's another point, is that you have to, as a hiring manager, as an employer, you have to understand that, yes, there's going to be an element of, you know, on the job training, and if there is, you need to communicate that. But also, you have to understand that, okay, this person has the base level skills, like we mentioned earlier. This person has the base level of skills to where I can take that, combine it with the on the job training they're going to get to really build what I want out of that applicant.
Well, let me take it back to the platform, and
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
blue
sure.
side, there's like too much going on for me. What it has really helped me with is understanding the implementation of controls, and when,
Mhm.
and you know, when different parts happen in the process. So you hear about all these different bits, but working out how they slot together, and if you're a defender, you know
Yep.
what fundamentals you have to do first. That again, I think, is if you're recruiting on the defense side, it's a great way to show that overall understanding and ability to apply the knowledge that you've got
Right.
from the collection of certificates that you've recently.
Again, yeah, exactly. It's the forest to the trees, right? So
Yeah.
understanding, yeah, yeah, understanding. Okay, fine. I've got this certification. I've got my CEH. I've got my LPT. I've got my OSCP. But understanding all the defenses, and I think that what people also don't understand is that, like, it's not an if you want to be a blue teamer, right? I want to be a GRC person. It's not enough just to say, well, I understand policies and I understand
Uh,
standards. You also have to understand how the red team operates. If you're a defender, you have to understand how the red team operates to have the most efficient defense. And the same thing on the red team is, if you're going to be a red teamer, then you have to understand how the blue team operates. And in order, it's it's like a football match, right? And I don't care if you're talking about uh,
Or
American football or UK soccer. No, sorry,
football,
yeah, football, or what is it? You know, football.
hoops.
Uh, um, down that, you know, south of our border, you know. Uh, or no, have you seen? Or no, it's what in Waterboy, the Adam Sandler
Yeah,
movie.
Adam Sandler.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a foosball's the devil. But if you you know, it's it's like a sports match, put it that way. All right, except for maybe cricket. I don't understand cricket, but
Who does?
yeah, it's like a sports match. It's like, what does it take, like 3 days to finish a game? I don't.
If not more, yeah.
So but any sport or any competition, right? You're going to run flat on either side if you don't understand. Your defense is going to run flat if you don't understand how the other team's going to attack you, all right? Or you're not going to have a good offense if you don't understand how to regardless. I mean, you have to game plan, right? So understanding the blue team if you're a red teamer, or understanding the red team if you're a blue teamer, is game planning. It's understanding your adversary, and you have to have both. You have to understand both. Not every defender has to know how to hack. Not every defender, not every red teamer, needs to understand how to configure a firewall and IP tables or whatever. But you need to understand the methods, the strategies at a high level.
And why it needs to be done, I think.
Right, exactly. And I think that's important for hiring too, right? I mean, hiring managers and recruiters, they should look for that. They should look for if you have a requisition for a blue team job, you should ask questions about what they understand about red team methodologies, but keep it in perspective, right? You don't need to ask programming questions or if they, or how well they understand how to write an exploit, but no, they need to understand the methodologies. And that is also going back to, earlier about using the platform. That's why we do have recruiters and hiring managers use ThreatGEN as sort of a litmus test, a quick litmus test, and actually have the applicants sit there and go through an exercise and explain what they're doing. That if they can go through a game of red versus blue and explain
Yeah.
why they're doing what they're doing, there's no better way to really get inside the head of an applicant and say, you know what, they get it.
I completely agree. And I've got to say this because it's one of the things I'm most excited about working with you and the team at ThreatGEN is the fact that we're working with a group of colleges in the UK who are bringing to market or bringing to the college system the first kind of cybersecurity qualification for 16 years plus, and having lots of children, but one son in particular who's 17, who's doing technology levels at the moment because he wants to get into cybersecurity. It's a very generic 2-year program with lots of different bits: game development, web development, tiny bit of security. But there's nothing in our country at the moment in the UK that's just specific to cyber, not through the college network. You've got boot camps and pretend colleges and all these other companies. And what I love about the work we're doing with them is that gamification is embedded into that process from the start.
Yeah.
So not only do the students get to see the bigger picture from the first moment that they play the game and engage on the course, but it's measurable as well.
Yeah. Yep.
That their knowledge that they gain, the way to apply that, the way the game's structured, you can't wing that game, right? You can't. I mean, I did pull a bit of a victory off against Eric, which was because I learned a technique, right? I know that social engineering is one of the most effective ways to get into an organization. I'm not a techie, so I just focused on that and I had a bit of luck. But when it comes to the blue team side, you have to know when to put those controls in place. You have to know, what bits to do in what order. Otherwise, you're going to have your pants pulled down. And I think for students coming in, being able to see that bigger picture from the start, you can't get that anywhere else at the moment because
Well,
it's narrowly focused.
and here's the thing. It's not about in the game. It's not about whether you win or lose. Looking at the metrics at the end of the game.
It is. Yeah.
But no, looking at the metrics at the end of the game, you get a good feeling for how, because the metrics and the scores is built off the performance, right? And and for example, right, looking at an actual soccer or football game, right?
Yeah.
I actually had a friend of mine, being as Americanized as I am, I guess being American Americanizes me pretty much, but but it, the American football, yes, there's waiting between each play. It's not as constant and active as like rugby, but there's a lot of scoring, right? And then it satisfies my desire for immediate gratification. Whereas in European football, soccer, whatever I don't want to call it, is there's more going on, right? You may only get one score in the entire game, but there's a lot more going on. It's the strategy, and it's the stuff that happens in between the scores that you have to learn to appreciate. And I think and that's what doing simulations and red versus blue is all about. Is it's not about did you win or not? It's about how did you perform? What are the metrics showing you?
Yeah,
And I think that's the important part.
Which was the MVP? Who held up play? Who delivered those balls long or whatever it is?
Yeah, and it was not you.
Yeah, it wasn't me. No, I just sort of tried running at the defense and got smashed a bit.
And I just want to mention that ultimately, this is literally not meant to be a sales presentation on red versus blue. I do want to give a lot of thorough advice on the lessons learned, and what I think is wrong with the hiring process and how to
Well,
fix
look,
it. But
that's
it
why.
just what but
Yeah,
but no, but I think to your point is one thing I was going to say, and this is the only salesy thing that I'll say, is that red versus blue does sort of epitomize all of the things that I'm talking about, right? Like about how to test, how to look at the forest of the trees, how to test somebody's applied knowledge of those skills and things like that. So red versus blue, yes, absolutely does put into practice all these things that I'm talking about. But at the end of the day, there's a bigger picture here that I want employers and hiring managers to understand, and that's, I think the key takeaways are you know don't get so, and if you have, let me just start off by saying again, if you have policies and procedures that mandate that you have
restrictive.
to do these wrong things, you need to change it, because at the end of the day, it's you need to look for talent in other ways other than um, college degrees and certifications. You need to have these, you need to look at people through a different lens. You need to look at their aptitude and their passion for cybersecurity and their ability to learn and the underlying skills. You need to look at certifications as a baseline, not as a requirement. Degrees as a baseline, not a requirement. You need to give more practical application-based interviews
Well,
and tests and
what
things like
about
that.
equivalencies as well to degrees? Because we always see, bachelor's degree required kind of on
Yeah,
every.
yeah. Well, I think, but there's a lot of equivalencies, right? I mean,
There is.
I love job recs that say, bachelor's degree or equivalent work experience. I love that because I think experience completely overrides a degree. When and now, okay, well, what happens? Well, entry level, I don't have a degree or experience. Well, that's where you look. That's why on the applicant side, you need to put,
That goes back
number
to
one,
what you
you
said
need to be
earlier.
active. Yeah. You need
Yeah,
to be doing projects. You need to be doing volunteer work. You need to be doing these things and put on your resume. And employers, you need to look at that and consider it.
yeah. I mean, let me tell you a quick story. For those that are watching who are looking to break in. So last year, I was doing some work with a penetration testing company in the UK, and we landed an ISO job for a client on a freelancer site. Quite a big job, and the pen tester had never done it before. I've worked in financial services for 25 years, so whilst I've done something similar, I haven't ever done it for this. So we were completely out of our depth. There was a guy called Stuart based in Scotland who's the policy wizard now on LinkedIn, if you want to check him out. But he had spent ex forces, sorry, not ex, it's the wrong word. I got told off for that the other day. Was in the military. Then I think he worked security jobs for a few years, fairly low salary, and he decided he wanted to get into GRC, writing policies and procedures. And he'd done about 9 months worth of study. We then grabbed him in on this job where he bailed us out of a big hole, by the way, like to get this job done. And he landed a role, I think, fairly high paying first role in cybersecurity from putting that on his resume and demonstrating that what he'd learned, he'd put it into practice. And I'm not saying that, if you're trying to break in, go self-employed. It isn't that easy. Not everyone's like that.
Yeah.
But like you said, Clint, doesn't have to be a job, doesn't have to be a paid role. It could be volunteer
Right.
work. It could be building a lab at home. It could be anything. But and again,
Yep.
it's
Yep.
going back to demonstrating you've got the right mindset to be in
Exactly.
the industry. And again, without wanting to piss on people's parade, I think there's a bit of mismanagement of expectations from candidates' point of view as well, dare I say it, without getting hated across social media. But I'd like to blame boot camps and certificate providers
Yeah.
for that, because
Yeah.
they're out there telling everyone, do our 6 month boot camp or 12-week boot camp and you'll be an expert in cyber and you earn 100 grand a year.
Yeah.
Well, it's nonsense, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
nonsense. It simply isn't.
Yeah. Or the thing, like, for example, so in the industrial arena, right? The GICSP, the the Global Industrial System Security Professional, whatever it stands for. Anyway, and at the end of the day, it's professional, right? So all I have to do is go past that exam, and I'm an industrial cybersecurity professional. It takes a lot more than passing that exam to be a professional. I think these certifications are marketed and labeled for like what you just said, right? It's like, oh, all you need are these 21 steps and you're a professional. It's just, you know, um,
But
I think that,
where's that driven from? Again, is that driven by the certificate providers? Is that driven by those
yeah,
organizations?
yeah, yeah, and I'll be the first to say, right? Like, I don't look, I'm just going to call it out. I don't care. Like, SANS has a lot of good instructors, and I think SANS has some good courses,
Yeah,
but I think that their practices are too commercial to
yeah,
actually do the industry real good. I think they charge way too much. It's for corporations. They don't. It's too expensive for individuals. Most of them are not practical application. It's just knowledge, and there's too much of the professional and the titles of them and things like that. So yeah, I think it. You when you have organizations and that's all they do, they make their living off of you know selling certifications. You're going to get that there. It's just a commercial market, and like I equated it to pharmaceuticals, right? When you have an industry that is governed by those that profit off of the sale of their product, it's self-serving, and it is it's a conflict of interest. And so while there are good certifications out there and there are good instructors and good education programs out there, I'm just going to say this: the entire industry, the entire world needs to rethink their perspective on certifications. And I think that,
and pharmaceutical companies.
yeah, and pharmaceutical companies, right? I
Well,
mean,
there's another analogy there, though, right? Because I read a really interesting article last week about how many hoops they have to go through to get one of these products or these pills or tablets, to market. It's a big thing, right? But what
yeah,
isn't a big thing, which we can liken to this to the certification industry, is the repatriation of these drugs to use them for other things, right? It's a simple process for them to say, "Oh, we've done some research. You can now use this to treat depression." Or you can now use this to treat your stomach. And
yeah.
that's how drugs.
Especially if you want diarrhea, upset stomach, a headache,
Exactly.
and
Yeah,
also
you're in.
suicidal
I've got the
thoughts. I mean,
tablet. I've got the tablet for you here. But I mean that's the problem. That they're not. It's not about innovation. It's not about changing the way things are done. It's about repurposing and repatriating existing material or examinations or whatever you want to call it, however you want to sort of bring it across. That's the whole problem with it. No one is bringing in new thinking. No one is looking at changing it. And that's what I think this show's all about. And how we're going to do that, Clint, I don't know, but we're working on it, aren't we?
well, I think it changing before you can change an entire industry's mentality. The industry has to be willing to change the mentality. In order to do that, um, they have to see the value in changing the mentality, right? So
Yeah.
there's a certain level of complacency and comfort in being complacent and saying, this is the way it's always been, so we're just going to do it that way. Why change? uh, a lot of cases, change is uncomfortable, and change
Yeah.
requires effort, and it takes momentum. But I think that there put it this way: there's not a single person out there that I've ever talked to that said, there's not a single person out there that has said, you know what, I really like the prices that Sands charges, and I think it's worth it. You know,
Although
um,
the only positives I do here is, as like you said earlier, I think it's some of the best material out there
well,
with
I don't
regard.
even think in a lot of cases, I don't think
No.
it's the best material that's out there. I think that I think that there are some of their courses and certification programs are really good, and some of them are the best at what they do, but not all of them. But I think that what you're paying for with SANS is the fact that you can say you've got that GIAC certification, right? You
Yeah.
got that certification from SANS, and so at the end of the day, it's not about the quality of the education or certification you got. It's the fact that you can put, I've got that certification on my resume, and it's worth crap, other
Yeah.
than the fact that you could put it on your resume and it bears weight. And until the industry stands up, and until the hiring managers stand up and they say, I don't care about that certification, it's just a baseline. What I want to see is how you use the knowledge. we're going to see overpriced certifications that don't actually give you diddly squat in terms of real skills or practical application. So there's a question there, what
There
is
is.
the next step in
It's,
getting?
it's the perfect final question, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah. It is. It's yeah. What is the next step in getting recruitment to change? Well, it's not. So first of all, you know what, and I'm gonna say, um, I'm gonna give Dragos kudos on this one. If you go to Dragos careers page, and you read the blog that Rob Lee put up about, and there are other companies that do this, but this is just the most recent. And you read the blog that he put on their hiring practices and what they do. It's phenomenal. I love their hiring practices. Number one, they put their salary range. They're not a range. They put the salary for each position on their website, and they don't do ranges. It's a salary, and they say, okay, first of all, they understand that different regions pay differently. So what they do is they say, we're just going to take the top market rate for that. So like let's say,
Doesn't matter where you live. Yeah.
no matter where you live, we're going to take the top market rate, and that's what we're paying for it. They don't put fluff in their job descriptions, things like, you know, must enjoy a challenge, I mean, come on, it's BS. They put the straight job requirements. They don't do things like, they don't do things like requiring 5 years of experience for entry level positions or whatever. It's straightforward, it's honest. So I think that Dragos is a great example, and their hiring practices as what the industry needs to do to change is, you have to value people. You have to value the entire person and their entire 360-degree experience, as opposed to just that degree, just a certification. You have to be honest, upfront, and transparent with your job roles, your hiring, salaries. You have to be fair. And I think it's real simple, quite frankly, is that stop putting so much weight into degrees and certifications at the surface, and understand that they're good and they're great for baseline, but that's not all it is. If we can just start getting companies and hiring managers to start to understand that right there, that it is a much more comprehensive look at the person and not just a certification, even for the initial test, the initial screening or whatever, and stop putting so much value into worthless certification. The certifications themselves aren't worthless, but how we view them is worthless. It's not a badge. It's not a credential. Certifications are not a credential. Certification is simply a an indicator. It's just saying that for the most part, all certification does is say that I understand this material well enough to take a multiple choice question test, except for practical OSCP, OSCE, right? The Cisco CCIE, right? Practicals are a big difference. That's different, right? So I think that's the first step is taking the example of companies like Dragos and being fair and transparent, and not putting so much weight into certifications and degree programs. And again, I want to reiterate, I'm not saying degrees are worthless and diplomas are worthless and certifications are worthless. And I'm not saying that, oh, you're a loser if that's what you put on your resume or whatever. No, I'm just saying that keep it in perspective. That's it. Just keep it in perspective.
I want to take it a bit further than that and use a financial services, and well, not an analogy, but I suppose return on investment, right, is something we hear about a lot in this industry, especially if you're in a leadership position and you're talking to the board. Well, firstly, the terminology and most people's meaning or understanding of return on investment is wrong. Let's start off with the fact that we're not returning anything on investment buying tools to cover us for cybersecurity. That's debt management, right?
Yeah.
In my opinion, from like financial services background, real return on investment, when we're back to people, process, and technology, with the biggest focus, in my layperson's opinion, in the industry, is around the process and technology and not the people. And where you get real return on
Yeah.
investment, real ROI, is when you invest in your staff.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you've got staff who are being challenged every day in a good way, interested in their job, the ability to speak and share, checking that, they have the knowledge to do, you have all these things, you're
Yeah.
getting true return on investment from that. And I
Yeah.
think it's not just the certifications and the hiring practice that needs some work. It's, the overall terminology and the understanding of the whole industry, I think, needs a bit of a reframing. And easy for me to say coming in after 2 years, not being in here before, but I don't know. I just think needs a bit all fur coat and no knickers, as my nan would have said.
Yeah, and I think that that's a whole other discussion in
It is.
ROI, but at the end of the day, I can sum it up by saying um, cybersecurity in general doesn't have an ROI any more than buying insurance on your car does.
Correct.
Cybersecurity is risk management, risk mitigation, and that's all. It's insurance. So anybody who tries to say, "Well, what's my ROI on cybersecurity?" is completely missing the point.
Agreed. Yeah, which is virtually every vendor in that vendor hall at Black Hat.
Yeah. Yeah, there is no ROI on cybersecurity because cybersecurity doesn't contribute to your revenue, your production, right? Cybersecurity.
Unless, let me just stick a caveat in there. Unless you're a SaaS provider where your CISO is part of the sales enablement process, and it's super important that there's
Yeah.
the odd difference.
Yeah. Well, that again, it really gets cybersecurity. You only have ROI in cybersecurity if you do cybersecurity as a service, or if and this isn't really ROI, but basically if you can have a demonstrable uh, something that you can show that says, well, because of this cybersecurity in place, we stopped this attack and it kept us from losing this much money, which is hard to prove, which is, so in other words, all you can do is retrospective ROI. You can't, or presumptuous ROI. You can't actually, there's no concrete ROI in cybersecurity, but that's a whole other conversation. And yeah.
It is, and I think maybe one we should have another.
But I think it applies to the hiring process,
It
right?
does.
So
Yeah.
so remove ROI out of your vocabulary when it comes to hiring cybersecurity.
I
Period.
completely agree. Clint, it's been, as always, when we have a chat, insightful, engaging, and entertaining. Thank you to everyone who's jumped in the chat with the questions. It's the questions and the engagement from the audience, I think, that makes all the difference. And Richard did mention earlier, and I haven't brought the question up, but I will now, because I think it was like a setup, because Richard's a friend of mine. But he said, how important do you think these live chats are? And how much help in changing things do you think they have? Well, I'm going to say a lot. And I think the more we can talk about it, not just on my channel, but all channels, the more we can have these open and honest debates, the more chance we've got of making a change in the industry. And
Yeah.
I think for anyone, final sales pitchy bit, because I am very passionate about what you do at ThreatGEN. If you haven't checked out the platform, the link for ThreatGEN is down there. If you'd like a demo, let me just if I give you the link in the chat to the YouTube page for ThreatGEN, there's some really good demos on there of how you can use that platform, whether it's tabletop exercises, whether it's training your staff, or just education. It's massive. So please do take a moment to take a look. And if you'd like any more information or you've got any questions, do reach out to myself. I'd be happy to.
Is there an at before ThreatGEN in the YouTube channel? Is it an at?
Yes, there is. I've just copied and pasted it from the URL because as of
Interesting.
2 weeks ago, we now get our own handles. So you've got at ThreatGEN. I've got at InfoSec Live. I know. How about that? But yeah, thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. And again, if you've enjoyed it, please do like and subscribe to the content. And if you don't want to watch us anymore, this will be uploaded to various podcast channels over the next few days. But everyone, Clint, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Take care, everybody. Thank you.